Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Great to see so many people on board this afternoon for our webinar on engaging employees in the new normal. I know we're all, especially in the last couple of days, really coming to hate that term, but unfortunately it's something we have to get used to. So on screen you'll see Niamh O'Doherty from WSI as always supporting our webinar, and Stephanie Good and Bertie Murphy from PWC. And I think this is a hot topic, and that's why I think so many people are on board this afternoon, are interested in this discussion, which is all around employee engagement and how in these challenging times we do continue to engage our employees, and as many continue to work remotely. So I know Bertie and Stephanie have a great presentation for us where they'll share their insights and best practice and also give some practical tips for you to take away and hopefully try out in your own organisation. So just to formally introduce, Stephanie is the Senior Manager in the Public and Organisation Practice of PWC Ireland and is also the Diversity and Inclusion Consulting Lead. And Bertie is Head of Customer Experience at PWC Ireland. And he asked me to point out that he is joining us from the Great Republic of Cork. And I know there's quite a few Cork members on this afternoon, so I'm sure they'll come up with all the really tough questions for Bertie. So really important that any conversations, any questions that you have, any comments, observations, if you want to include them in the chat section as normal over to the right hand side of the screen. Well, right hand side on mine, I think it's generally the right hand side for everybody. And also just to remind you that a copy of the presentation and a copy of the recording will be available in the members area, and we'll have that up for you at some stage tomorrow, hopefully. So with that, it's 2 minutes past 2. I'm going to hand over to Bertie. Thank you so much as always, and looking forward to the presentation. Thanks, Bertie, and thanks, Stephanie.
Thank you, Dorothy. So to begin with some background on PwC here in Ireland. So we're a global professional services firm. We operate across audit, tax and advisory. So within advisory here in Ireland, we have a large consulting practice, over 450 employees across our Dublin office and our regional offices. Our focus is on supporting large-scale transformations for our clients and delivering integrated solutions across people, process, and technology. People is a huge element for me in terms of business performance, and employee engagement is absolutely fundamental to business success. So it's no surprise that employee engagement is a challenge that has been highlighted with COVID-19 and the dispersed workforce. So Stephanie sits in our people consulting team and has been supporting our clients with overcoming the employee engagement challenges presented by COVID-19 and that dispersed workforce. So I'm delighted to pass over to Stephanie to get us underway today on the presentation.
Great. Thanks very much, Bertie, and good afternoon, everybody. So if we move on to the first slide, thanks very much. So today's session is entitled Engaging Employees in the New Normal. And that's a phrase, as Dorothy mentioned, you've all been hearing a lot about lately. But what does it mean? So COVID really has brought about one of the biggest and fastest changes that the workplace has ever seen. We've had a global, unplanned shift to remote working on a massive scale almost overnight. And the new normal really is a workplace characterized not just by remote working. Oh, sorry, I think we might be on the, sorry. Apologies, not just by remote working, but by great uncertainty about the future. For many, there are also significant challenges in balancing work and personal commitments, and for others, mental health concerns. So it's not surprising at all to me that staff engagement was listed as the top challenge of managing staff remotely in the recent CCMA survey. Over the next 20 minutes, Bertie and I are going to explore this new world through the lens of the employee life cycle and the actions that you can take to successfully engage your employees at a time when employee engagement is more complex and urgent than ever. As Dorothy mentioned, we're going to share insights and best practice from our clients, and we're going to share some practical tips to equip you to take action at key points. This isn't a short-term issue because really COVID, is bringing about lasting changes to the world of work. PwC's recent CEO survey showed that Irish CEOs in particular value the flexibility of a workforce that can work remotely. So we firmly believe that remote working is here to stay. Back in June, respondents to the CCMA survey estimated that in 2021, the split of office to remote working would be 60-40. 3 months on, what do you think today? So we're going to ask you now to participate in a short poll. And the question is, what percentage of your workforce do you believe will be working remotely in January? And our options are less than 20%, 20 to 40%, 40 to 60%, 60 to 80%, and 80% plus. So I'm going to give you a moment now to register your vote.
Great, they're flying in, guys. Another
Great.
20 minutes.
And I mean, these will be your people's best guesses. We're not going to come back to you in January to say whether you were right or wrong.
Great, so closing it now.
So
Okay,
I'd call it there, if that's okay, Stephanie. So if I'm reading it right, 45% of the people on the webinar are saying 80+% of staff will be working remotely. 35% are saying 60 to 80%, and 20% are saying 40 to 60%. So nobody's saying less than 20%, and nobody's saying 20 to 40. So by far, the biggest one is 45% saying 80% plus of people will be working remotely in January. So we're in this for another long while.
I think so, and thanks everybody for participating. Those are some really interesting results, and I think they do show us how even in a short space of time things are changing, and it really is impossible to know what the future holds. But we do know for certain that there are challenges ahead. You know, we're in the middle of a second wave of COVID right now, and further potential lockdowns are on the horizon. And organizations are definitely moving forward from a variety of different starting positions, and we're seeing this with our clients. So some organizations have fared very well in wave one and maintained levels of employee engagement. For other businesses, they have had to focus their energies elsewhere, and it hasn't been a priority. And for others still, you know, you yourself might be in a position today where you're undertaking activity now that will challenge engagement in the future. So you might be doing restructuring activity, for example. But regardless of wherever it is that your organization is today, you know, being nimble and responsive in real time will be really important to ensure that you're engaging your people in the new normal, whatever the future holds. So what we're going to do is we're going to go on to the next slide and talk about the specific actions that you can take. So I'm going to start by talking about two items that are fundamental across the life cycle before I talk about specific elements of the employee life cycle. And the two elements I think are really important right now are leadership and communication, because we know in times of change, employees look to leaders for security and certainty. And I'll talk in a few minutes about the leadership behaviors that we recommend, but let's start with some actions. So my advice to leaders is to openly talk to your employees and managers about employee engagement as a priority. It's a really reassuring signal for people to see continuity in your agenda and that people issues are still a priority. It's really important as a leader that you support your team leaders in turn, because they're the front line for driving employee engagement and ensuring that they have the capacity to, I suppose, take forward the agenda around employee engagement, and that they're recognized for their efforts is really important. From a comms perspective, very important to have a single, clear narrative and to provide as much clarity and certainty as possible about the future, whether that's about your business plans or about your remote working arrangements. And we've seen some organizations be very proactive in this space, particularly on the technology firm side of things. So for example, Twitter and Facebook telling employees in the summer about a move to indefinite working from home arrangements. Communicating regularly, simply and meaningfully is really important, and equally so, maybe even more so, is that you will ensuring opportunities for two-way communications with employees so that you're hearing their views and you can answer their questions quickly, even if the answer might be, we don't know yet. The most engaging approach really is to create an ongoing dialogue with employees rather than one-off communications. So I'm going to move now into talking about the employee life cycle, beginning with recruiting and onboarding, because even in these turbulent times, 40% of you were planning to hire this year when you completed the CCMA survey. So before you start hiring, take some time to think about the profile of those you're hiring. Do you need a different kind of candidate to work effectively from home? Might they come from a different background or talent pool? So for example, we've seen with one client, they were hiring their first backfill class post-COVID, and their typical employee was historically somebody in their first job post-education. But given the immediate need for employees to work from home, they sought out more experienced hires. So that's something you may want to think about, but just keep in mind if you're hiring differently, to keep in mind cultural fit, so that any new hires that you hire at this point will still fit and work effectively when you return to the office. If you're hiring differently, think as well about what will be engaging for those employees. So if you're able to offer greater flexibility, for example, in shift patterns, build that into your employee value proposition to increase your attractiveness. And for new teams or backfill classes working remotely, we all know how it was important and challenging it can be to retain new hires in a call center and shared services environment. So it's really critical to engage people effectively at the beginning. And this is a particularly important issue, when working from home. So think about your strategy for agent engagement to avoid attrition. And a good place to start is by focusing on creating a sense of belonging to the organization. We're seeing some clients use virtual inductions really effectively to create a sense of connection to the organization's purpose and values. And I've also seen some really good activity around using those involved in diversity and inclusion activities to help onboard new hires. So connection to the organization is important, but so too is connection to colleagues, because this is a really important glue that holds people in organizations. So think about ways that you can create a sense of community. And some actions that we're seeing with our clients are things like arranging team activities online to enhance social connection and make staff feel part of the culture. So things like quizzes, virtual coffees, a real focus on creating a sense of fun, holding more team meetings to improve communication, ensuring people are getting FaceTime, creating opportunities for new hires to connect virtually with colleagues on a one-to-one basis, as well as in groups. So ensure that you have a clear buddy onboarding system with time carved out in the schedule for those key interactions. And our advice would be to run surveys of new joiner classes to identify early stage engagement issues. So those are the things that are important from a recruitment and onboarding perspective. Thinking then about developing and deploying your staff. The priority really here is on maintaining a focus on development and building knowledge, because we know that professional growth is really important when it comes to employee engagement. But in a busy environment such as right now, it's really easy for one-to-ones or team meetings or training to be deprioritized, and for employees to miss out on those really valuable opportunities for coaching and development. For our clients who are maintaining a strict focus on L&D, we're seeing a rapid shift to virtual learning and e-learning platforms. And I've seen some really good examples of virtual learning, such as a client who set up a microsite for managers on virtual performance management with digital resources, channels for peer sharing and discussions, and another client that rapidly pivoted to use MS Teams for training delivery and really embraced digital in their training design, using polls, chat, and breakout rooms really effectively. Anecdotally, we can see organizations that have invested in digital transformation, both in terms of their technology and their workforce's skills, are navigating this new normal much more effectively than others. However, our research does show there's a gap between the digital skills people have today and those that they need to work in the new digital world. But it's not too late to invest in those, and they should be a focus area for learning and development. It's really important to think about your team leader population as well and the capability there, because managing people remotely requires quite different skills, such as empathy and the ability to foster a sense of community. So my advice would be, if you can only invest in one segment of your population for L&D, this would be a really important one to focus on. And finally, just ensure that there's ways for employees, particularly new hires, to access organizational knowledge. So that could be through the development of FAQs and knowledge bases, as well as ensuring that there's hands-on support from those in quality roles. And I'm going to hand over here to Bertie, who's going to discuss performance.
Thanks, Stephanie. So when I think about measuring and managing performance, the starting point for me is that everyone comes to work to do a good job, and then challenges or performance barriers get in the way. Yes, we've all been there at some stage as an employee. You're in control, you understand clearly the expectations of you and your position to execute successfully. You feel completely engaged, which results in superior performance, a type of employee nirvana, some might say. The opposite set of circumstances, unfortunately, is also true, and this results in poor performance. The challenge of performance barriers has become an even bigger issue now with the dispersed workforce. We all know the elements that need to come together to deliver on this employee nirvana, and we need to be even more focused on them now with the dispersed workforce. So for me, the first point is very much clear performance expectations. What are my key performance indicators that I need to achieve? And how can I move the dial on those as an employee? It's very important I have that clarity. Visual management. So you have established within your contact center, shared service center, visual management principles, and how you share information with employees around performance. How do you do this in a digital environment? Have you got the communication correct? Really, really important. Creating accountability. I mean, once you have accountability, you have a key event that you need to turn up to talk about your performance, and it really drives employee engagement through focusing on achieving those metrics and performance. Positive reinforcement is a key part of that. Stephanie touched on the team leader role. I think the coaching element of the team leader role is really, really important. And in terms of moving to a virtual environment as well, the team leader role has really evolved. On premise, it's very easy to see performance issues or see disengaged employees and be able to intervene. You have to have a more structured approach now as a team leader and actually create those touch points with employees that just occurred naturally on premise previously. Flagging issues as an employee is important, and that you create the environment that the employee can do that and highlight challenges that are preventing them from being successful in their job, and creating a continuous improvement, problem-solving focused approach around those issues. One other point we're observing, which is quite interesting, is in the on-premise world, you could see your team and you could establish how your peers were performing, and that created a high-performance culture amongst a lot of teams. Having been removed to work from home, we're seeing challenges in terms of this visibility and understanding where the bar is set and understanding how you strive for and achieve that standard of your team. So again, sharing the team metrics and having clear visibility of those and creating an environment where every member of that team strives to meet that performance level is important. Processes is a key issue we're seeing in the work from home environment in terms of driving engagement and productivity. So again, in the on-premise environment, employees can reach out to team leaders and product support specialists quite easily in terms of standard processes and what they should be doing. And that, in a lot of organizations, has created a gap where these aren't well documented and they aren't very clear. And moving to a work from home environment, then that's created a challenge in terms of employees executing against these processes and having those informal touch points that they had on premise. That's not achievable. So it needs to be structured. So it's slowing down execution. Having a clear operating rhythm is really important. When I come to work, I know when I start, I know when I finish, I know when the key events across the day are, and that clarity for employees is very important, and it's even more important in a work from home environment. And finally, don't forget to celebrate success. It's really, really important that teams celebrate together and that time is carved out for that within the schedules. So PWC have wrapped this into a repeatable approach that we call Perform Plus. It incorporates a cloud-based technology to connect remote employees. We've executed on all the elements we've called out above, across a number of teams globally, and we're achieving higher employee engagement scores and also a huge increase in terms of productivity, on average 30% productivity release. And it's having a significant positive impact on other key business metrics also. The approach has been a game changer for our clients and their employees. I'll pass back to Stephanie now to talk about reward and recognition.
Great, thanks, Bertie. So I suppose anyone who's been involved in employee engagement surveys will know that pay is traditionally the lowest scoring item, and it's really likely that you're in a position right now that your ability to provide pay increases is limited. However, if you have budget savings in the absence of workplace activities such as nights out or your Christmas party, our advice would be to think about investing some of this in non-cash rewards to build engagement. You can use these rewards as a way to recognize people and at the same time create a sense of team, which can definitely be missing when working from home. Some interesting practices that we're seeing are virtual team lunches delivered to employees' houses and gift cards to local restaurants that deliver. Instead of the Christmas party, one of our clients will be organising a Christmas tree to be delivered to each employee. Recognition and appreciation are always important, but when working from home, it can be more challenging, as Bertie mentioned. Managers don't always have access to the physical and verbal cues that they might pick up in the office, and there are fewer water cooler opportunities to provide on-the-spot acknowledgement. One way that we've seen employers, I suppose, address this issue is through peer recognition schemes, and we've seen clients use those quite effectively to highlight and recognise good performance. The last thing I'd say around pay and recognition is really just touching on mental health challenges and employee resilience. They're key topics right now, so if you have a wellbeing programme as part of your reward system, Our advice would be to use it to build resilience in your workforce. For example, communicating about your employee assistance program, and interact with your organization's healthcare insurance provider to see what supports they can offer. For example, virtual yoga or virtual meditation. The last piece we're going to talk about is managing engagement. And according to the CCMA survey, 73% of you expect attrition to be lower this year. But I suppose it's clearly the case that retained employees aren't necessarily engaged. So ensure that the employee engagement infrastructure that you have in place is working well and providing regular updates. That's really important now because things are changing so rapidly. Have a role in your organization that drives engagement and can create and provide expertise and support to your people managers in particular. And be clear about people managers' roles in employee engagement and create enough capacity for them to take action. Ensure employees have enough time to engage with any employee engagement activities and initiatives that you're running by building them into your ways of working where possible. Working from home, it's really easy for people to slip through the cracks and not engage. In fact, your busiest people are probably the least likely to engage and those who need it most. So keep an eye on those who aren't engaging and reach out. And ensure that you have insights that you can make database decisions by continuing to do your employee engagement surveys. And if you have attrition, use your offboarding process to create further insights by holding exit interviews. So if we move on to the next slide now, I'm going to summarize and add some additional detail for you. There's 4 takeaway actions that we think will help you as a leader to maintain and improve engagement levels. As Bertie mentioned previously, you need to ensure that you have the right KPIs, and that's not just for productivity, but for employee engagement, because they're going to provide you with ongoing insight about how effectively you're managing engagement. Continue to develop the role of leaders. Team leaders may need specific coaching, which Bertie also mentioned, to successfully manage their teams during this transition to the new world. And as we've discussed today, regular recognition not only helps create and maintain a positive working culture, but is also an important driver of engagement and productivity. As leaders, you need to identify new ways to gather insights on the performance of those working from home and to provide recognition that's tailored to individuals in meaningful and genuine ways. The last thing I'll talk about is using structure to deflect distractions. Before lockdown, PwC data suggested that as much as 30% of a team's time is spent on non-value add activities. And there's a risk that this could increase in the new environment. So building clear structure into team schedules helps support the focus of a dispersed team. And that can be through short daily catch-ups or breaks. I mentioned leadership behaviors earlier, and there's 3 behaviors as leaders that you can use to create good engagement. The first is modeling the right behaviors. Show visible leadership in remote working and connecting with teams. I was speaking to a CEO last week and she said she had been very conscious when her organization was returning to the office not to be the first person back in because she was aware that she would set the tone for the top for her employees. And I thought that was really insightful and there was great self-awareness there. So think about your own ways of working and what they're telling people about what's important and acceptable in this new working from home environment. And as a leader, I think it's really important to empathize with the personal circumstances of those in your teams. The boundary between work and home is really much more porous right now, and people's circumstances are having a much greater and more direct impact on their work. So be open and share your own challenges as well as listening to their concerns. Enable others to work virtually by delegating appropriately within your teams, providing visibility of all the work that's happening, and empower your team members to take accountability. And lastly, praise often and celebrate success. Reinforce the good behaviors that you're seeing and recognize performance in ways that matter to your team. I spoke at the outset of this presentation about the challenges ahead in managing employee engagement, and I really hope over the last 20 minutes or so that Bertie and I have given you not just food for thought, but practical actions that you can take today and that will leave you feeling more confident about your next steps. If you'd like more information, we have links in the next slide to some PwC thought leadership. And if you'd like to keep the conversation going, please do reach out to us. Our contact details are on the final slide. So all that's left for me to do is say thank you for your attention. And we're very happy to take any questions that you might have.
Great, thanks a million, Stephanie, and thanks, Bertie. I think a lot of food for thought there. I really like the idea of the company that's buying everybody a Christmas tree. I heard of one of the member companies who normally has a summer barbecue and obviously couldn't have it this year, but what they did was they sent everybody a picnic blanket, which I think is a lovely touch. Now, obviously, if you have a big budget, you can do that sort of thing, and for smaller companies that's not an option. But there are really, I think, little things can mean so much to people in the current circumstances that it doesn't have to be a big budget item that you're sending out. Question around technology and what technology do you think is useful and appropriate or can help support employee engagement in the new ways of working remotely? Do you have any suggestions on that?
Definitely. So we're seeing a number of areas where technology is supporting better employee engagement, and it's acting as a real bridge to connect the home back into the office in terms of recreating the office environment virtually. So the connected worker is absolutely key. So have I visibility of key information in terms of schedules, the ability to swap shifts and interact with when I work and how I work, and making it effortless for the employee, we see as key to engagement. Empowering people to be able to do their job with technology. So we're seeing a lot of clients investing in areas like CRM, cloud telephony, and AI, particularly AI to assist agents in terms of doing their job and their role in delivering. So again, back to being empowered as an employee. If you have the right technology, you're empowered and you can execute more effectively. So we're seeing that as a key lever to drive engagement and performance. Another area that's quite interesting that we're seeing a big trend in globally, and we're actually working a number of big projects on, is around the social worker. And this is where kind of social media applications are being deployed at companies to create a culture and environment around sharing information, insights, and allowing for peer-to-peer employee engagement also. We're currently supporting one of the biggest restaurants globally on a rollout across their entire employee group. I think it's over 2 million workers worldwide, huge project. So it's a really, really interesting space, and a lot of organizations seem to be embracing it, and it's certainly accelerated now with employees removed from the workplace.
And Stephanie, can I ask, you mentioned about digital skills and the need for, what exactly do you mean, or can you give an example of what you would consider to be digital skills and how they can be transferred where people are obviously being trained remotely?
Yeah, I think what we've seen, particularly in the last number of months, is some organizations have started to roll out digital tools. So that could be something as simple and straightforward as MS Teams. And what I've been observing is, I suppose, a lack of support. Sometimes those by necessity are being switched on very quickly. So suddenly everybody's working from home, you need to have a meeting platform, and the time and energy and change management activities that we would normally put into implementing a new system like that we haven't had the time to do that. Organizations have struggled with that. So I think it's whatever digital tools that you need in order to do your job, is making sure that people have the skills to use it effectively and maximize their value.
Great. And a question from Niall. With the new work from home situation, do you see a move of staffing to lower cost regions or countries based on the work from anywhere move?
That's a really interesting question. Sorry, Bertie, if you want to field that one.
It's really interesting, and actually I see it perhaps the other way. Certainly talking to clients, because a significant overhead is the premises cost in Ireland. And we're seeing a lot of clients talk about re-onshoring work that they had offshored. Now with the availability for employees to work from home, so their total cost of ownership of employees a lot less without that facilities overhead. And I think the other thing is how long COVID persists for is permeating this conversation, because the whole security of the home and actually working at home, and particularly cybersecurity risks, there's a perception or a view, whether that is true or not, that the risk is lower maybe onshore in terms of those particular risks than maybe a nearshore or offshore worker working remotely at home, and the conditions mightn't be in place for that type of worker to work effectively at home in an offshore or nearshore location versus the conditions that are available in Ireland in the home. So it's a really interesting consideration longer term as we look at where work is placed and where work is sourced from.
Yeah, no, and I must say, any examples I've heard have all been people bringing stuff back up onshore. Absolutely, completely, because I think when everything happened in March, a lot of the offshore locations didn't have the infrastructure in place for people to work remotely. So a number of companies didn't have the choice but to bring it onshore. So you know, in that respect, you know, you'd hope there's possibilities for new work and new employment in the sector. We literally have only about 30 seconds, Stephanie, to talk about culture and the importance of culture and employee engagement. If you want to just finish with that quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a topic that is hot on the agenda for almost every company I talk to at the moment. And I suppose we've all heard that phrase, culture eats strategy for breakfast, and that's no less the case for employee engagement. So yes, your culture is really important. You know, one of the key elements of employee engagement is quality work, but that on its own isn't enough. You know, the connection you have to your colleagues, the support and relationship you have with your line manager, really important. And if you think about culture as being about behaviors, you know, there's no getting away from the fact that there is an absolutely there's a real connection between the two. So keep an eye on your culture, because that will drive disengagement. So it's absolutely essential you have the right culture in place.
Now, Gillian has just said, love the Christmas tree idea. Have you seen any other creative ideas like that? I mentioned the picnic basket. One other one I heard of, Gillian, which helps, is there's a really cool company up in Galway, and we all have to be shopping local and shopping Irish, called the Sock Society, and they are doing some fabulous socks. I only bought some online. There's a 50th birthday, unfortunately not mine, coming up in this house in the next few weeks, and I only bought some online today. But I think even something small like that, like they're expensive for socks, but they're lovely, and it's an Irish product. So I don't know, Stephanie and Bertie, if you've come across anything else.
I think anything that you do that's novel is going to get a bit of energy and excitement. I mean, it's the equivalent of doing a desk drop. We've all seen what kind of enthusiasm they can generate in an office, but they do need obviously a bit more support in terms of the technology and I suppose the logistics bit around it. I think there's loads of information out there at the moment. So if you're keeping an eye, you're reading widely, you'll come across some innovative ideas. But nothing gets away from the fundamentals, which is good people management. I think that's absolutely fundamental to employee engagement. So my advice would be, if you can put some effort in there, you'll definitely reap the rewards.
I just finished with this question, and Michael, I might come back to you on this directly, because it's come to me from a few people. So Michael has asked, what supports are businesses giving employees to work from home? We had a working from home policy pre-COVID, but it was only when employees could prove they had an environment to work from home, PC, laptop, broadband. Are businesses now giving employees these supports to staff? Absolutely. I was asked this question by a member only last week, and I did a quick check with the different companies, and it varies by company. Some companies are giving a financial allowance for people to go buy a desk and a chair. Other companies are, obviously have provided laptops, have provided chairs. It really varies by company and by industry. And some are obviously looking at things like if broadband isn't available, that they give extra support on broadband. And I suppose as it goes more longer term, people are also looking at things like an allowance for heat, electricity, that type of thing. I don't think there's one size fits all, but certainly, Michael, feel free to drop me an email, and I'll send you what information I have. Niamh is kindly reminding me that we're gone 3 minutes over the time, so apologies about that. I have to plug 2 CCMA upcoming events completely linked to our discussion today. One is we're starting a series of 4 sessions of yoga from tomorrow morning. So you all should have got the email on that earlier today. It's with Mandela Yoga at 11 o'clock, but the recordings will be available afterwards. Really encourage you to maybe sign up. If you can't do it at 11 o'clock, do it later in the day. It's a little bit different to these normal webinars, so you will need to sign in. So it just takes a little bit more work just to get it organized. And then the other, we actually have an event on Friday talking about AI. So linked to both of some of the discussion points from today. So just to say thank you so much to Stephanie and Bertie. Really interesting, great insights, great ideas. And I think that's how we all learn from each other, is by sharing all these ideas and keeping focused on what's important in this whole phase of the pandemic, which is keeping everybody engaged and happy. So thank you as always. A copy of the video will be available tomorrow, and the presentation, and hope to see you on further and future CCMA webinars. So thanks again to Bertie and Stephanie and to all the team at PWC, and thanks to Niamh. Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.